It was a quiet autumn afternoon in Maplewood, a sleepy suburban neighborhood where fences were painted white and gossip was the local sport. From her living room window, Martha Ellison, 78 years old and fiercely proud of her manicured rose garden, peered across the street with her usual mix of curiosity and suspicion. Her new neighbor had just moved in 2 weeks ago, a tall black man in his 30s, driving an old pickup truck and wearing work boots. He kept to himself mostly, fixing things around his small, neat house. But to Martha, the sight of him was enough to set her nerves buzzing. Strange, she muttered to her cat. Used to be quiet around here. Now there's music at all hours, cars coming and going. It's not the same neighborhood anymore. The truth was, the music was soft jazz that drifted gently from his open window on weekends, and the cars were just his friends helping him move in. But Martha didn't see it that way. She saw change, and change frightened her. That afternoon, she decided she'd had enough. She marched to her phone and called the Homeowners Association. Yes, it's Mrs. Ellison again. About the man on Elm Street, the one with the truck. I think he's running a business from home. No, I haven't seen anything illegal, but I know something's not right. The HOA representative sighed politely. We'll make a note, ma'am. Martha hung up, feeling triumphant. Someone has to keep order, she muttered. Later that day, as she stepped outside to water her roses, she noticed the man across the street carrying groceries from his truck. He glanced up and smiled. Afternoon, ma'am, he said kindly. She stiffened. Yes. Afternoon. I'm Darnell, he said, extending a hand. Just moved in. If you ever need help with anything, I'm right across the street. She looked at his outstretched hand, rough, strong, polite, and ignored it. I'm fine, thank you. He nodded slowly. All right then. Have a good day. Martha turned away, her lips pursed. We'll see how long that lasts. That night, as the wind rustled through the trees and a chill crept into the air, Martha settled into her recliner, satisfied that she'd done her civic duty. She didn't know that in just a few days, the man she'd judged without knowing would be the one standing between her and death itself. Because fate, like fire, doesn't care about fences. 3 days later, Maplewood was blanketed in the stillness of a cool October night. The leaves rustled gently across the pavement, and the streetlights cast golden halos along the sidewalk. Inside her cozy little house, Martha Ellison sat in her armchair, knitting while the television murmured in the background. The air was calm, too calm, and the faint hum of Darnell's jazz floated through her open window. She sighed loudly. That man and his noise, she muttered. Doesn't he ever sleep? She rose to shut the window, grumbling as she shuffled to the living room wall. But as she reached for the latch, she noticed something strange. A flicker of orange light outside, reflecting faintly on the glass. She frowned and turned toward the kitchen. That's when she smelled it. Smoke. At first, she thought it was her imagination. Then came the faint crackle, the low roar that no one mistakes once they've heard it. She turned sharply and saw the kitchen curtains catch fire. The stove must have shorted. Her knitting needles clattered to the floor. Oh, dear Lord! Panic surged through her. She tried to reach for her phone, but her trembling fingers dropped it. Smoke thickened, swallowing her vision, stinging her lungs. She coughed violently, stumbling toward the door. The doorknob burned her hand. Martha, are you okay? The voice came from outside, deep, urgent, familiar. Through the smoke, she heard pounding at the door. Mrs. Ellison, it's Darnell. Open up! She tried, but her knees buckled. Her living room blurred into a haze of flame and fear. For a moment, everything faded. The heat, the noise, the world itself. Then, suddenly, she felt strong arms around her, lifting her off the floor. The air outside hit her like a wave of salvation. Cold, clean, alive. She gasped, coughing uncontrollably as someone laid her gently on the grass. Through watery eyes, she saw him. Darnell, soot streaked across his face, his jacket scorched at the sleeve, eyes wide with concern. Stay still, he said, voice calm but breathless. The fire department's coming. She looked at him, stunned. Her lips trembled. You came in for me? He nodded. Saw the smoke from my porch. You weren't answering. I couldn't wait. In the distance, sirens wailed. Neighbors gathered on lawns, their faces lit by the orange glow of the burning house. Someone threw a blanket over Martha's shoulders. Another brought water. As the firefighters stormed in, Martha couldn't stop staring at him. The man she'd called Trouble. The man she'd reported to the HOA. The man who had just walked through fire to save her life. Why? She whispered, voice breaking. After how I treated you? Darnell met her eyes, kind, steady, unflinching. Because you're my neighbor, he said simply. And neighbors look out for each other. Tears slid down her wrinkled cheeks. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came, only gratitude, raw and wordless. As the firefighters put out the last of the flames, the quiet street of Maplewood seemed to hold its breath. The fences that once divided them now glowed in the dim light of redemption. And as dawn crept over the rooftops, Martha realized something she'd never understood before. Sometimes the people we fear most are the ones sent to save us. The fire trucks were gone by sunrise. Only the smell of smoke lingered, drifting through Maplewood like a quiet memory. The once proud Ellison house now stood blackened and broken, its walls blistered from heat, its garden of roses nothing but ash. Across the street, neighbors still whispered, trading the night's horror in low voices. Inside Darnell's small kitchen, Martha sat wrapped in a blanket, trembling. Her face was streaked with soot, her hair singed at the edges. He'd given her water, a chair, and silence, the kind that felt like grace. She looked around his home, modest, tidy, filled with photos of family and scripture verses on the wall. It was warm, not because of the heater, but because of him. Your house, he said quietly, setting a cup of tea in front of her. It's mostly gone, ma'am, but you're safe. That's what matters. She nodded, her voice weak. I should have listened to the fire alarms. They've been chirping for weeks. I just kept forgetting to change the batteries. Darnell smiled softly. It happens. You got lucky, Mrs. Ellison. Really lucky. She stared at him for a long moment, guilt washing over her like another wave of smoke. I don't deserve this, she said finally. Your help, I mean. After how I treated you. He shrugged, sitting across from her. You don't have to deserve kindness. You just have to need it. Her throat tightened. I said things, awful things. About you, to the association, to people around here. I know, he said gently. Word gets around. Tears welled in her eyes. And you still came in after me? He leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. And ma'am, when I saw that fire, I didn't see a woman who judged me. I saw a neighbor who needed help. That's all. She covered her face, her shoulders shaking. I was wrong about you, about so much. He gave her a small, forgiving smile. We all get things wrong sometimes. What matters is what we do next. Outside, the first light of dawn crept over the burned rooftops. The neighborhood was quieter than usual. No one knew quite what to say. Some had filmed the fire on their phones. Others had prayed from their porches. But everyone knew one thing for sure. The man they had overlooked, whispered about, or avoided had done something extraordinary. By mid-morning, the local news van arrived. Reporters wanted to talk to the hero who saved his elderly neighbor. Darnell declined every interview. Wasn't heroics, he said simply. Just doing what's right. Martha watched him through the window, her heart breaking and mending at the same time. For years she had feared what she didn't understand. But fear had nearly killed her, and kindness had saved her life. When he came back inside, she looked up at him with a trembling smile. Darnell, she said softly, I don't have much left now. But I promise you, I'll spend whatever time I've got left making things right. He nodded, his eyes gentle. Start with breakfast, ma'am. It's the best way to rebuild. She laughed through her tears. It was the first time she'd laughed in years. A sound cracked and human but real. That morning, as they sat at the kitchen table, the world outside still smelled of smoke and loss. Yet, in that little house on Elm Street, something new was beginning. Something built not on fences or fear, but on forgiveness. The following week brought chilly winds and gray skies. But for Martha Ellison, the world had never felt warmer. She was staying at a temporary shelter arranged by a local church. Yet she spent most of her days sitting in Darnell's kitchen, sipping tea while he worked or reading aloud from the old Bible he kept on his counter. Every morning, she insisted on helping him sweep the porch or bring coffee to the other neighbors who came by. It was her way of paying a debt she knew she could never truly repay. At first, some of the neighbors looked surprised to see her there. Martha Ellison, the same woman who once called the HOA about every barking dog or late trash can, now chatting and laughing with the man she'd once distrusted. Word spread quickly through Maplewood, and soon curiosity softened into quiet admiration. People began to wave when they passed Darnell's house. Even the ones who used to cross the street when he walked by stopped and said hello. One morning, Martha brought him a small tin box from what was left of her belongings, soot-covered but intact. "These were my late husband's tools," she said. "He was no mechanic, but he fixed everything in our house. I think he'd want you to have them." Darnell took the box with care, wiping away the ash. Inside were an old wrench, a tape measure, and a screwdriver with a wooden handle. "They're beautiful," he said softly. "Thank you." She smiled, her eyes bright with tears. "You saved my life, Darnell. That's something I'll never forget. These are just a peace of mind I can give back." From that day, they became a pair of sorts. The old woman and the man she once feared, bound not by tragedy, but by transformation. Darnell repaired her smoke detectors in the temporary home. Martha baked pies for him and his friends from the neighborhood. On Sundays, they both sat in the back pew of the same little church, side by side. Months later, her house was rebuilt. The insurance company covered most of it, but Darnell and several neighbors volunteered to help repaint, plant flowers, and restore her garden. The day the roses bloomed again, Martha stood by the fence, her hands clasped, looking across the street at Darnell's house. He waved from his porch. "They look even better than before," she smiled. "That's because this time, they grew in good soil," he laughed. "I guess that means you're planning to stay put." "Oh, I'm not going anywhere," she said. "Not until I repay every ounce of kindness you showed me. Though I suspect I'll be chasing that debt for the rest of my days." He shook his head. "You already have, Martha. You changed." She looked at him, eyes soft. "I know. You changed me." For a long moment, they stood there. Two neighbors who had once been divided by fear, now united by fire, forgiveness, and friendship. The white fence between their houses still stood, but now it wasn't a wall. It was a bridge. As the sun dipped low, casting long golden shadows across Maplewood, Martha whispered to herself, "Funny thing about fire. It burns away everything you don't need. And sometimes it leaves behind exactly what you do."